about. And then she's going to go to Philadelphia for that big rally with a number of people. And of course, that is a city that has a large African-American population that she's going to want to turn out big for her. You were talking about those numbers. I talked to a Democratic strategist earlier today. Let's walk through what some of the numbers in Pennsylvania are looking like. So the Harris campaign is feeling good about, and the Democrats in general are feeling good about the fact that mail-in ballot return rates are higher right now than they were in 2020, 81% this cycle versus 78 in 2020. Black voting among 30-year-olds to 49-year-olds is up 27% last week compared to the previous week. And on Saturday, the Harris campaign knocked on, and get this number, 807,000 doors, 807,000 doors, 2,000 door knocks per minute. That is, they say, a huge ground game, and they're hoping that ground game really helps them in turning out this critical battleground state that both candidates likely have to win in order to win the White House. Ladies.
Indeed. Yamiche Alcindor, thanks so much to you. And joining us now, former HUD Secretary and MSNBC political analyst Julian Castro, and former Republican Congressman from Florida and MSNBC political analyst David Jolly. So, Julian, first to you. It's such a big push in these final days. Let's talk about what you know about Pennsylvania and some of the issues, or any of these key battleground states where you think that things could be different from what we were expecting.
Well, you know, that poll out of Iowa by Ann Seltzer, who, as folks have heard by now, if they didn't know her name already, now know, is the most respected pollster in the nation. Very accurate. If we see the kind of movement, especially for women, for suburban women, for older women, in places like Pennsylvania that she has seen in Iowa, then I think that that's very good news for Kamala Harris. You add that to, of course, the Puerto Rico comments that in the Hispanic community are still reverberating. And what I've heard is that it's not just Puerto Ricans that have been incensed by those comments, but other Latinos. And so we know that there's a sizable...
That's a big population.
Yeah, we know that that's about 4%.
Majority Latino.
That's right. And as Yamiche mentioned, Kamala Harris is visiting one of those communities today in Allentown. There's also Reading and a number of other communities. This is a super close race. And in a super close race like that, where you're dealing with tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 votes of a difference, any of these things could make a difference.
There's new polling out from YouGov and Univision showing 64% of registered Latino voters in Pennsylvania are now backing Harris. Did those comments move the needle, do you believe, David?
Oh, I think so, and not just for the Latino community, which is certainly not monolithic, but you've spoken in previous hours about the female vote in this election and others. I think the last gettable voters down the stretch for the last week and even going into tomorrow is probably someone who voted Republican in the past, maybe a soft Republican, an independent, and so maybe within the Latino community there is a get out the vote effort around the Puerto Rico comments or some of the typical crass comments of Trump and his surrogates, but it translates to all demographics. I mean, part of the resistance to Donald Trump that we've seen over the last 6 to 8 years are people who simply don't like the division. They don't like the caustic nature of the comments. They don't like the misogyny, the racism, and the flirtation with division. And so you don't have to be Latino to say, the comments at Madison Square Gardens were out of line, and I don't want that to be reflected in the next leader of the country. You don't have to be a woman to say, I don't want a country that buries reproductive freedom and insults women with misogyny. Actually, those are broad themes within the country that I think thread together this coalition that is turning towards Vice President Harris down the stretch.
One of the things that surprised me over the last couple of days, Julian, is I've spoken to people who are Puerto Rican either by birth or through family. They all told me that they were getting phone calls from friends saying, are you okay? That they were concerned about them. They thought it would bring up a lot of issues that they didn't need to have brought up in the way that it was brought up. Do you have a sense of how big the tentacles might be? And do you think they're real?
Oh, yeah, I do. I absolutely think that they're real. I think also that, as David was alluding to, there may have been some folks who were on the fence. I mean, I think there is something, too, in the Latino community, this sense of, well, is Trump going to be better for the economy?
Yeah.
If there's one thing that Trump is, we know that he lies a lot. But if he has a superpower, it's marketing. And in every speech, he says, we had the greatest economy ever, right? You say that enough, and it starts to seep in. But what that Puerto Rican comment did by that comedian was it suddenly, I think it turned more people back to where they were before. They don't want the division. They don't want the chaos. They don't want to feel like this is a guy that's putting people down. And not just, you're right, David, not just for Latinos, but it reminded Americans that didn't support him in 2020 why they got rid of him in the first place 4 years ago. And I think it really hurt the campaign.
We see Josh Shapiro speaking at Kamala Harris's rally in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro, the governor, very popular governor of Pennsylvania, talking in a place, as we were just talking about Puerto Rican voters, quite a few Puerto Rican voters there in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I spoke to the mayor out there just the other day, and he said he got a lot of response from his community about the island of garbage comment, and that it was a lot of negative response and people saying that it confirmed to them or confirmed a suspicion they had that Donald Trump and the people around him don't care about them and their homeland, their heritage. NBC News correspondent Garrett Haake is also in Pittsburgh today, also in Pennsylvania, following the Trump campaign, though. So, Garrett, it's going to be a big, long day for Donald Trump. He's in Pennsylvania now, heading to Michigan at the end of the night for his last rally. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? You know, Vaughn mentioned something earlier in an internal email about crowd size. I'm always wary of talking about crowd size with Donald Trump and whether people leave, because it wasn't really a good indicator in 2016. Has anything felt off to you this time around? Anything different?
It's really hit or miss, Katie. It sometimes depends on where we are. I was at a rally with Trump in Warren, Michigan last Friday at the same exact venue where I'd been with him a few weeks earlier. This most recent event was only half full. But then later in that same day, we were in Milwaukee at the Fiserv Center, home of the Milwaukee Bucks. The arena was packed to the rafters, at least when Trump started. So some of this can be a function of anything from how far delayed he is on any given day, and he's running significantly behind now. And some of it can also be, are you in a state with significant early vote? Did people already vote for Trump and decide they've done their due diligence? Now, here in Pennsylvania, not a huge early vote state, and you see a significant line of folks waiting to get in. We're just outside the Pittsburgh Penguins Arena in Allegheny County. The folks at the front of this line have been lined up here overnight in some cases, all the way through this line that extends all the way back up here on the block. They've been in a pretty good mood all day. Folks waving and honking as they come by. But, Katie, this is not a place Donald Trump won in 2020. In fact, Joe Biden banked 150,000 votes out of Allegheny County. So I think what you're seeing now from Trump in places like this, in Greensboro, where he was earlier this week, another fairly Democrat-friendly area, is trying to cut into those margins, find places where he's not jacking up Republican turnout, but trying to just sort of slice away at the numbers that Democrats will need if Kamala Harris is going to have a big night on Election Day. Part of the problem for Trump is it's often in those places where he steps on his own message. We heard that at Lancaster County yesterday, where he was all over the place saying, you know, I shouldn't have left the Oval Office, or ruminating about people shooting through the press. It's in these places that he needs the cleanest delivery, I think you could argue, to affect the few undecideds who are left. And he's struggled to do that so far. We'll see which version of Trump and how on message he is when he shows up here in Pittsburgh, where I know he wants to deliver a message about fracking, energy, the economy. Been watching anybody in a hard hat showing up to this event being escorted right around to the VIP entrance, I think to be placed, I suspect, just behind Trump in the background to broadcast that point to a wider audience once we eventually get underway here in Pittsburgh. Katie?
Garrett Haake, thank you so much. We're going to keep our eye on Pennsylvania. You can see in Reading, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is there in advance of Donald Trump. But still ahead, what's happening on the ground in Wisconsin that has Democrats feeling a little bit more hopeful about a win in that state? We're back in 90 seconds.
What's causing the rise in book banning? On my podcast, Velshi Banned Book Club, I speak with authors of banned books to try and find out.
I think what they're really objecting to is that a young person has perceived the hypocrisy and corruption of the generation that has created their world.
This book saved me in a lot of ways, and then I published it hoping to help people find a blueprint to heal.
Season 2 of Velshi Banned Book Club. Listen now.
Same-day voter registration makes Wisconsin the ultimate wild card, and the campaigns are leaning in, leaving nothing undone as they scramble to try to reach every single voter that they can before tomorrow. Historically close margins, though, have decided 4 of the last 6 presidential elections in Wisconsin. But Wisconsin is also home to one of the most hotly contested U.S. Senate races in the country, and Democrats are not leaving anything on the table. Joining me now, NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So, Shaq, you know, you're at one of incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin's canvass kickoff stops in Winnebago County. We talked to her earlier, a couple of hours ago here. What is the mobilization effort, though? What is that like? Because we're seeing a lot of, you know, same-day registration, and Democrats right now have an edge, according to all of the data that's coming out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, so the thing is, when you look at here in Wisconsin, early voting is now over in terms of that in-person balloting. So you cannot go to your local clerk's office and do that early voting anymore. You can return your ballot, and then, of course, Election Day is happening tomorrow. So that's why you're having the work that you're seeing in these offices right now, where I'll show you around. We're in between shifts right now where volunteers are making packets. They're launching off and going door knocking. I'll let you take a look at one of the groups right now, because they're going off and trying to add to their numbers. Right now, we know across the state, about 1.5 million people have already cast that ballot, either by mail or early in person. So right now, what they're doing, they're making packets. They have a reminder that Election Day is coming up tomorrow, and a reminder for people's polling location, telling them that now is the time to go out and get ready to vote. And one advantage that a lot of these parties are having right now because of early voting is that when they hear that a voter has already voted early, they don't knock on that door again. So you've heard cases of the list of voters that they've had to contact now dwindling down because of all that early voting here in the state of Wisconsin. Now, one thing I did talk to Senator Baldwin about when she was here was I asked her, you look at some of the big population centers like Milwaukee, you see turnout so far is trailing the rest of the state. When you look at averages, she said that's why you have this flood of momentum in that area at this point. It's why you have former President Bill Clinton, why Vice President Harris was here on Friday, this weekend, former President Barack Obama. Today, Governor Walz will be in Milwaukee. They know that it's all about turnout. This is a state where it always comes down to those tight margins. So you combine the efforts that you're seeing at many of these offices across the state with the visits from the candidates, and that's what Democrats are hoping on when it comes to polls closing tomorrow. They're hoping that gives them the advantage.
Shaq Brewster, thank you so much. And joining us now, the chair of the Democratic Party from Wisconsin, Ben Wickler. Okay, Ben, tell us what you're seeing and hearing on the ground. What's going to be the difference there?
I'm joining you from Ozaukee County. It's a northern suburb county of Milwaukee. This is one of the places with the biggest swing over the last few cycles. Jody Haber-Sinekin on track to flip a state